All right, I'm here joined with Mario Wynands, the managing director and founder of PikPok. This is a very special year for PikPok and for Mario because it's the 25th anniversary of the business, and it's been through quite a lot of changes and changes in the industry and changes as a company. And I'm really grateful to have Mario for with me today to ask a few questions. So just to get started, I just want to ask a very kind of just broad question, but how does it feel to have a business that's turned 25?
I guess I'm starting to feel old now, hitting that milestone. This is an industry that is definitely demanding and taxing, but just the change, the people, the innovation kind of keeps you young. But you kind of hit a milestone like that, and it's like, oh wow, we've been doing this for a long time. So yeah, it's an interesting milestone for us to reflect on and think about how far we've come and I guess what we've still got to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, you've had to face a lot of shifts in the industry, and I think you did an amazing job of capitalizing on mobile as a platform when that kind of emerged. And I'd love to know when you started when the company was formed in 1997, did you ever think about what the company might look like in a couple decades time, or were you just kind of focused on what was happening here and now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've certainly learned a lot about business and entrepreneurship, and even though I kind of came through university with a computer science degree and a commerce degree, and had worked as a business consultant. Somehow when we started the company, off the back of that kind of grounding, we still didn't really have much of a plan. Um, and certainly I wouldn't be starting any kind of new business without much of a plan. We just saw an opportunity to start developing for console when Sony announced the home programmable version of the original PlayStation, and we just kind of got wrapped up in the excitement of that possibility, and sort of got together with my fellow co-founders Tara McCauley and Stuart Middleton, and I guess just started developing games from there. And I guess when you think back to that time, the internet was around, but it was still kind of late 90s, so digital distribution wasn't really a thing. Publishers still controlled everything. Um, Games had budgets of hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, which was kind of beyond what we were capable of funding. So I'm not really sure what we were thinking, other than let's just do this somehow and see how far we get. And turns out we got a lot further than maybe we should have, going into it kind of blind without kind of any long-term plan.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned how publishers kind of controlled things back then, but is there another challenge that you faced back when you started that you don't think is an issue anymore for new developers?
Um, yeah, I mean, there's certainly all sorts of challenges we faced. Fundamentally, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know how to make games. And I guess there's a lot more resources out there available for people to kind of get started. The tools are much stronger. We were creating our own 3D editors and level editors, to use. We just didn't have stuff available. But I think it's just easier to connect with people now, and easier to start building an audience and a buzz around your game. That was super hard back in the day when you kind of had to meet people in person, and you still do to an extent, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit more. But in order for us to really get any kind of momentum, we had to be on a plane, we had to be in the US, we had to be in Europe, we had to meet publishers face to face. And that was something that I think we weren't really prepared for. We wanted the quality of our work, the fun of the games we're making to kind of stand on its own and to kind of sell itself. But I don't think we were really prepared for how much relationship building we had to do, and how much we had to prove ourselves before we could really get the shot at doing something meaningful.
Yeah. Just kind of riffing off of that, do you think that there is still, I mean, COVID might play a part in the answer, but do you think there is still this kind of need to be present in like the US to kind of be as successful as you want to be these days?
I think it depends on the goals of what a particular studio is trying to do. There are certainly all types of games that people can make that don't require partnerships or a lot of funding or big marketing campaigns, whatever it might be. But if you're creating the type of game that requires a publisher or needs some kind of meaningful partnership with a large company, it's pretty hard to build that relationship exclusively online. Humans are social animals, and in order to build the kind of trust that you need between different parties in order for one of those parties to write you a very large check, you've had to have built that relationship, and that is just so much easier to do in person. I think COVID definitely had an impact on things, and the tools for remote collaboration and relationship building are a lot better. But even then, I would say a lot of studios had gotten by on the relationships they had going into the pandemic and traded on those. And there are a lot of smaller studios kind of getting into the outsourcing space, for example, prior to COVID, that struggled because they couldn't build those relationships face to face. So yeah, I think it's really important, but it's also expensive. You need to pick your moments, you need to pick your conferences, and you need to make sure you're ready and you're in a position to put your best foot forward when you get on that plane.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Are you traveling a lot these days now?
Yeah, I certainly not as much as I was. I think prior to the pandemic, I was traveling internationally sort of between 6 to 8 times a year, which was a pretty rough schedule, but I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the variety of things I was doing between kind of being involved in different incubator and mentoring things, as well as the business trip, the business development, and the expos, and kind of seeing what was out there. So I definitely found the first year of the pandemic pretty hard, being stuck in New Zealand. But yeah, I've started traveling again actually since October last year. We've acquired a studio in South America, which means I'll be getting there once or twice a year from now on as well. So I've got my list of conferences. I doubt that I'll be overseas even 5 or 6 times this year, but I see it ramping up again once international travel becomes a little bit easier. I went to GDC for the first time in years, and managed to catch COVID within the first 2 days after dodging it here in New Zealand for 2 years. So
Wow.
So yeah, there's risks associated with that, but yeah, what I actually don't like is just the overhead of travel now. It's just so much more laborious to get all the paperwork together. That's the bit that's annoying to me.
Yeah, I think people didn't realize how easy it was maybe a couple of years ago to just hop from one country to the other.
Exactly.
So you mentioned at the beginning that if you were to start a new business, you'd have a proper plan than you may have had in 1997. Does that mean, or does PikPok have a kind of a 25-year roadmap from here onwards? Do you kind of know where what direction you want to take? Is there anything you can share about what your mindset is for what the next 25 years might look like?
I think one of the things that has really helped us over the years is having a plan and having a good eye on the horizon, and actually beyond that, and trying to anticipate where things are going. That was one of the things that helped us pivot to digital distribution and ultimately mobile. And we've been able to kind of stay ahead of the curve. I think today is both an exciting and a really scary time in the industry, because there has never been as much change happening in the industry as there is all at once right now. And it's a combination of things. There's more legislation on the table around privacy and monetization. There's all-you-can-eat gaming services that are becoming successful. Streaming is kind of starting to come into its own. We have all, markets emerging and markets kind of closing off, like China. We've sort of, VR is still trying to work itself out, and now there's the metaverse spin on it, but at the same time we're kind of on the cusp of an augmented reality paradigm shift, not only in games but in tech in general. So it's super hard to work out, what are the right platforms to be on, what's the right technology to have, how will people even want to be entertained in 5 years time, much less 25 years time. It's really exciting, but also I think kind of tricky to navigate. And I think that has meant that one of the things we've been trying to do in our business is, rather than necessarily trying to anticipate where markets are going and where technology is going, is kind of assuming that change is going to be more disruptive and faster than we can anticipate, and creating a business which is nimble enough to be able to be responsive to that change. So right now, we're changing things around how we develop games, how we evolve games, how we make decisions, how the company is structured, and making sure we're kind of across enough different types of things that are emerging right now that we're not starting from scratch if the market shifts one way or the other.
Yeah, that sounds, and that's probably a struggle that almost every business or every game studio is dealing with right now, is how to deal with this shift and emerging tech and things like that. So yeah, definitely not an easy problem to solve, and something you just kind of need to get on for the ride and pivot when the time's right. Is there anything that you'd hoped that PikPok would have achieved by now that you're kind of still edging towards, or is there anything that you kind of, maybe if that question doesn't have like a clear answer, is there anything that you thought would happen that hasn't kind of manifested yet?
Well, certainly when it comes to the naivety of youth, we sort of started the company with the grand idea, inspired by Final Fantasy VII, that we were going to create a great RPG, as one does with a team of 3 inexperienced people. So we're yet to create an RPG, though that has long since stopped being an aspiration. And actually, I think that's one thing that I guess has been a conscious choice, is that when we started, we had particular ideas for particular things that we just felt we wanted to create, and that's one path you can go down. but I feel that we've been flexible in terms of the types of games we've turned ourselves to, and kind of evolved depending on what the skills of people within the company were, and some of the interests of those people. So sometimes people are surprised when I say that I don't have the burning desire to create the game that's in the back of my head. I just want the company to create the best games we can, whatever those games might be. And I think that's a pretty big change from where we started out.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like in 2009, when when mobile was an emerging platform, and I feel like PikPok really capitalized on that change. That's like the perfect halfway mark between when you started and now. The halfway point is in 2009, and I'd love to know what that moment was like when that pivot kind of happened, or was there a big decision? Was there like a big meeting? Do you remember that moment that you saw that there was an opportunity that you wanted to maximize?
I think that pivot, actually took place over a number of years, and was kind of starting to be put in motion actually for a few years before then. So it wasn't as quite as sharp a pivot as it may have seemed from the outside. We had the good fortune to be working, with different publishers and working with great people. And I remember talking to an analyst working for a publisher that we were with, who was pointing out, I forget whether it was Christmas 2005 or Christmas 2006, and he pointed out that there would be more console games released in that coming Christmas than in the history of game development,
Wow.
by a wide margin. And we sort of looked at that as a worrying time, in terms of, potentially there was just so much stuff being flooded to retail shelves. There's only so much space you have in retail. And unless you're a AAA game, it's going to be very hard to stay on shelves. And for a B console developer, we made our bread and butter at the time working on kind of not value titles for the most part, but kind of B tier titles that were a little bit more niche, that were on the middle tier licenses rather than the top tier licenses. We knew it was going to be difficult to kind of keep that middle in the industry where we're at, because either you're a AAA title and you stay on the shelves for a long time, or you're a value title that stays on the bottom shelf for a long time, because the economics work that way. And we didn't want to be caught in the middle there. So we actually started developing Xbox Live Arcade, PlayStation Network games. We were actually the first third-party title on the PlayStation Network back in the day. We developed for Xbox Live Arcade. We were developing for Steam, and then when the global financial crisis happened and the middle dropped out of the console market, we already had some traction behind us, and that meant that while other developers in the console work for hire space were scrambling for work and kind of having to cut their margins and cut their budgets, we were able to continue doing that, but also kind of double down on our self-publishing digital distribution strategy. So over 2009 was when we launched Shadow onto Steam, and where we thought we'd give the App Store a try. And our first game went horribly. We licensed the Fame license from MGM, and for that movie reboot, and that game I don't think even earned back the very small license fee that we needed to pay. But then, you know, we started experimenting with other things, and you know, Flick Kick Rugby was our first sort of title that had some success there. And then, you know, we're like, oh, we made this game in 2 weeks with 2 people. That's doing all right. And we kind of started going from there and building up a bit of a portfolio. And by the time we got to less than a year later with Flick Kick Football, and releasing that to even more success, we thought, okay, we're onto something here. And I think it was 2011 was the last year that we did kind of a console work for hire title. And even then, even though that last title was just kind of doing a publisher a favor, because we didn't want to extract ourselves that quickly. So yeah, we kind of started in 2006, ended in 2011. And somewhere along the way, you know, we went from being a console work for hire developer to a developer and publisher of games.
Yeah, wow, that's fascinating. It seems like there were a lot of really important decisions that were made during that time to get you to where you are now. On that note, I'd love to know what kind of qualities you feel like it takes in a person to, you know, navigate, because you have to really have an open mind. And like you said, you kind of set out to make an RPG, and that hasn't come to fruition yet, but you've put the business first and the reality of kind of what kind of business you have in front of you to make games. I'd love to know what kind of qualities you think it takes in a person or in a team to navigate like a changing industry like games.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a mix of positive and negative traits that helped carry us through. I guess, you know, there are a couple of times where depending on the lens you viewed things through, what perhaps seemed like courage and perseverance may have seemed like recklessness. When it came to believing in things and just pushing things kind of to the edge. And, you know, there were multiple times kind of in the first decade of the company where we were running out of money, and things were looking pretty dicey, and where we had serious conversations about, you know, should we shut up shop and limit what the damage is going to be here, or should we push through? And ultimately, you know, we decided to push through every one of those times, and that's the right decision in hindsight for us. But it could have easily gone the other way, I think. So I think it's hard to say that, you know, courage and blind faith is really a good quality when, you know, there are certainly other friends I've known that have lost their studios operating that same way. I think, you know, in order, again, talking about what we talked about before, the industry just changes so much all the time. You know, we started developing for the original PlayStation, and we're releasing multiple titles this year on PlayStation 5. Like we're 5 generations of console on over a 25-year period, which isn't that long when you think about it, in terms of the rate of change. And so I think that the key thing that's kind of got us through is always being open-minded, being flexible, challenging assumptions that you had before, you know, not being so entrenched, for example, on creating our own technology, being open to off-the-shelf solutions, you know, is something we've gone back and forth on multiple times over the history of the company. So yeah, being willing to evolve, being willing to adapt, to change, and I guess even expecting change to happen is probably the key thing that has got us through.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's really good advice, and really Yeah, really interesting to hear. So our time's kind of up. I just want to thank you for your time. The last question that I have, which is just kind of a bit of a goof of a question, but what is the most important thing to you in the next 25 minutes, 25 weeks, and 25 months? I'm just curious about your kind of state of mind, the kind of things that are important to you in your business right now, and what's kind of happening.
Cool. 25 minutes. Well, I need to work out what to prioritize this week. That's, one of the challenges with a lot of things to deal with in the company. I actually have some time on my hands this week, so working out the myriad of things I can get done. That's my plan for the next 25 minutes. Is what's the most important stuff for me to tick off the list this week. Next 25 weeks. I guess we've been through an interesting couple of years in terms of COVID, in terms of changing, as I mentioned, some internal processes, changing how we're working. We have new business relationships in place. Really, the next 6 months, we're kind of wanting to bed down a few things and just make sure that all of the things we've changed in terms of policy and learning and skills and ways of working, that we bed that down a little bit more. So I wouldn't be expecting too many surprises from us in the next 6 months, while we just make sure that all that change kind of beds down.
Mhm.
And then the next 25 months, I guess, we're expecting more growth. We're expecting that's where we'll be announcing new titles. Will
Mhm.
be that's where the surprises will come, I
Yeah, yeah.
guess. We're wanting to build our presence in Colombia with the new studio,
Mhm.
build the team over here, and kind of really after the foundation we built over the last couple of years, that will be bedding down in the next 6 months. Over the next 2 years, we'll be wanting to kind of level up again.
Mhm.
And so there'll be some big challenges there, but I think people will see some interesting things coming out over the next couple of years.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, wow. Thank you so much for your time. Anyone that's interested, www.pikpok.com to see all the titles and news and previous projects that have been released across the 25-year journey of PikPok. Go check it out, follow their pages and their latest releases. Thank you so much, Mario, for your time and for sharing some of your insight and perspective in this important year. I hope to see you at NZGDC and yeah, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.